So the $1.6 billion defamation lawsuit by Dominion Voting Systems against Fox News is going forward. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. If you share my concerns, maybe you could like this video, subscribe to this channel, maybe even click that little bell that will notify you when I post something new. So if there's any single entity that has been harmed by the big lie, aside of course from America, I would say that entity is Dominion Voting Systems. As most of you know, they're a manufacturer of voting machines that are used in many states, including many states, by the way, that Donald Trump won. Well, right after the election, when it became clear that Joe Biden had won the election, Dominion became the target of a relentless barrage of attacks. Essentially, the bad actor, according to the conspiracy theories that were floated by Donald Trump and Sidney Powell and all the rest of that crowd. They claimed, of course, that Dominion Voting Systems was the way that the vote was manipulated to allow Joe Biden to win the election, despite the fact that, as they claimed, that Donald Trump had really won. Well, as it turns out, there's not a shred of evidence to support those allegations. And what's more, and even more tellingly, you don't see Donald Trump saying that he's not going to accept the results of states that he won where Dominion voting systems are in place. And Republicans who are elected in states that Joe Biden won are perfectly happy to accept the results that elected them, even while they're questioning the results that elected Joe Biden in the same election, which is absurd. I mean, the evidence continues to mount that voter fraud, A, is not a problem, and B, often when it is a problem, it's done by Republicans. In fact, the Associated Press just announced a study, and I'll post a link to an article referring to that study down below, looking at every case of potential voter fraud across the country in the 2020 election. They found that out of 25.5 million votes that were cast for president in the states that they looked at, states that voted for Joe Biden over Donald Trump by 311,257 votes, only 475 of them actually had any basis to find voter fraud. In other words, a tiny, tiny percentage and not nearly enough to impact the results of the election. And what's more, in most of those cases, it was actually the Republicans committing voter fraud, not the Democrats. So the upshot of this study is, number one, voter fraud is extremely rare. Number two, it's generally not a coordinated process, so it's not some big effort to overturn the election. Number three, to the extent that there was any voter fraud, it certainly wasn't enough to impact the election. And number four, it's more often committed by Republicans than by Democrats. None of this, of course, is going to matter to the MAGA crowd who continue to believe the big lie. And in fact, at this point, it appears that about 60% of Republicans believe that Donald Trump won the last election, despite all the evidence to the contrary. And this is an example of what we call motivated reasoning, which means you're not interested in the facts leading you to a conclusion. Instead, you start with a conclusion and then find facts to lead up to it, whether the facts are true or not. But one place that motivated reasoning typically doesn't work is in the courtroom, because there you actually have to have real evidence, and it ends up getting challenged by the other side if you have any questions about the credibility of that evidence. That's why courts have repeatedly dismissed any allegations brought by Donald Trump and his lawyers questioning the results of the 2020 election. And why it's to the point that even a lot of these courts are imposing sanctions on Donald Trump's lawyers for bringing allegations into the courtroom without any kind of factual basis. You just can't do that in court. You actually have to have facts to back up what you're saying. Now, within a political context, you should know it's very hard to prove defamation. In fact, Donald Trump has some experience with this, where he's sued different reporters, and generally those cases have been thrown out because of the fact that he is viewed as a public figure. Under the laws established in the case New York Times v. Sullivan, and I'll post a link to another video about that case later on. But under that case, if you're a public figure, there's a different standard that applies to your communications. When people want to say something about you, if you're a public figure, it's much harder to prove that they defamed you. The statements not only have to be untruthful, but have to be made with reckless disregard of the truth. So it's very hard to prove defamation in the context of an election. Well, based upon that law, Fox News brought a motion to dismiss in that lawsuit, and that motion to dismiss was denied, showing that the court believes there is actually evidence at this point that Fox News reported facts that were untrue, reported them with reckless disregard for the truth, and as a result caused substantial harm to Dominion voting systems. What kind of harm did they cause? Well, aside from just reputation, I mean, you have to remember, who are the customers of Dominion voting systems? They're local governmental entities. If Donald Trump and his cronies have created such negative views of Dominion voting systems among the electorate that purchasing their equipment for local elections ends up becoming a political liability for local elected officials, then that essentially destroys their business. Thus the huge number of damages that they're claiming against Fox News. A number that, by the way, is not unreasonable and they might well get. Now, another piece of good news, by the way, about the judge's decision that this case would not be dismissed, it allows discovery to go forward. This is the process whereby Dominion voting systems can haul people from Fox News into court and have them testify under oath in response to questions brought by the attorneys for Dominion voting systems. It also allows them to go and gather data and information from Fox News. All information that will ultimately become part of the public record of this lawsuit. My hope is that Dominion voting systems will stand strong and not simply settle this case quickly, which is what I'm sure Fox News is going to want to do, because Dominion voting systems has a case. They might well win their full measure of damages, and I can only imagine the embarrassing information, potentially even information that points to criminal liability on the part of Fox News on its hosts as they go through the discovery process. Well, if you agree with me or disagree with me or have any questions about this lawsuit, please feel free to leave your comments down below. And here's a link to the other video that I mentioned earlier. And if you could like this video and subscribe to this channel, that'd be a huge help. I'll see you in the next video. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.